Okay, hello everyone. I am Dr. Johnson. Periodically, what you will find is I will make videos for you, um, just so that you can see my face and hear the voice attached to the face. Since we are learning from a distance, we kind of lose that human touch. And there's a benefit to the human touch. So it's just nice to know that our professor is real, that Dr. Johnson is not AI, but an actual real life flesh and blood human who is hoping to guide you, facilitate learning, and give you a good experience. So sometimes I will just do an audio announcement. Sometimes I'll do a video announcement. It'll just depend. And other times it'll be writing. And some of what will guide that is how much work we're having to submit. It's kind of feast or famine. With Southern New Hampshire. And so if we're having a week, a module where there are a whole lot of submissions, then I'm going to be forced to dial it back a little bit just so that I can make sure that I'm getting your grades to you on time. Otherwise, when it's not as much, I'll try to just kind of vary things up a little bit, just to kind of keep the interest up and keep that personal touch. So what I want to talk about in this particular recording is identity. As we kind of kick off our first week, there is just so much to understanding identity, how identity is shaped, and how it functions, particularly in a society, a diverse society at that. And so I just wanted to make sure that you had the benefit of your professor's experience. This is my wheelhouse. I work a lot with identity, actually more in teacher education, but that's okay. We can talk about it from a more comprehensive standpoint without a problem. So in order to kind of, I guess, provide a little bit of rigor and interest, I thought I would kind of dial into this conversation that is already pretty much pulled together by Southern New Hampshire all by itself with regard to the content. So anyway, let's start with our agenda so that we know what we're talking about. And I will try to get us through this relatively quickly because I know you've got a lot of videos and you have a ton of reading to do. And I am asking you to do that reading. This topic, particularly in this day and age, globally, but so much in the United States, I take this topic very seriously because I have seen what it looks like when we drop the ball on this and the damage that is done, particularly to students, when we do not take this topic seriously and really deeply engage in the discursive moment, the moment to discuss this and to reflect and to think and to bring about a change, personal change, and also change within the world for the betterment of who we are. Again, as I represent Southern New Hampshire, I'm representing the United States, who we are as Americans. And who we are going to continue to be as we evolve into the future. If we are going to be a healthy, better nation of people, we must engage in these conversations. So I take this topic very seriously, and I'm asking you to do the same. And so I am looking for you to do your reading, not think that you can just kind of skim over it and that you're going to be able to have the kind of conversation that is going to produce the kind of grades that you might like to have. So I will absolutely be looking for tidbits from the reading in your submission. So as you're doing your homework assignments, you keep that in mind, that I am looking for you to back up everything you are saying with the texts that we are reading and the videos that we are watching, so that I can see that you actually are engaging in this and that you are pulling these pieces of information into your personal space, as that is how we learn. We have our own personal experiences. We do some reading, we do some video watching, we pull all of those pieces together, and it helps to build knowledge. And then we share that knowledge with one another to then further expound upon that knowledge. So the questions we want to ask in this moment together, what do we need to know about our work? Well, I've already told you one thing, and that is that I'm expecting you to do your reading, and I'm expecting to see that reading and those videos reflective in the work that you submit to me. And if I don't see that reading and those videos and the content there, backing up what you are talking about in your discussion boards and in your journal submissions, that's going to be points. Okay, so your points are connected to my ability to see that you are actually doing this work. So that's one thing that I needed to say. The other part of that in answering what do we need to know about our work is going to be the expectations of academic writing, and I will talk about that in a moment. And then from there, we want to jump into our content. What do we need to know about identity? So those are our two questions we want to ask. So of course, I'm going to talk about the expectations of academic writing. We're going to talk about the complexities of identity construction. I'm just going to give you an overview. We're going to talk about intersectional or multiple identities. We're going to talk about the evolution of biases. We're going to see a really cool video. Cultural humidity, or excuse me, who cares about cultural humidity? Humility, the root of cultural competence, which is one of our topics. And then we want to talk about racial biases, and we want to get a little bit of a better understanding of this idea of race, so that we can answer that question for ourselves. Exactly what is race? Where did this race thing come from? And in doing so, we actually are going to find ourselves disrupting racial biases. And so that's our agenda. So let's just jump in here. On to the first bullet, which is academic writing. Folks, a text message or an email, those things are not, that's not academic rigor. That's not academic writing. Southern New Hampshire University has that word university attached to it. And they are offering you a 4-year degree, and they are putting a professor in front of you to do her part in getting you along your way towards that degree that you're looking to earn. And so in an academic space, one of the things that we learn outside of research being very important to colleges and universities, in order to do that research and make sure that that research is published, we also learn how to write. And writing a text is great, writing an email is great, but academic writing is something else, and it requires engagement. It requires detail. It requires examples. It requires development. It requires that you ground everything that you are saying in the text and in the videos that we are using for this course, because your opinion is great, and we really do want those opinions. Your life experience is very valuable. But when it comes to academic writing, that personal experience must connect with the academic reading, and those videos that are also considered part of the academic canon. That is your content. They must be connected. It is a pain in the neck sometimes. Everything that I write must be grounded in somebody's theory. And we always kind of joke and say, nobody cares about your opinion. Of course we care about your opinion, but that opinion for an academic submission must be connected to scholarly writing, to theory, to prior published works. So when I say that I need to see the reading and the videos reflected in your submissions, I need to see you referencing that stuff. It's not because I just want to give you something extra to do and make your day miserable. It is because that is part of the academic preparation. That is a college or university. And so that is part of the expectation. It is part of the grade. Okay. So let's say, for example, the question that you were responding to in a discussion board or in a journal submission is, how do you experience diversity in your current workspace? And your response, which is a response, is there are lots of people of various religions and races in the workspace. Diversity is a given in the world today since it's a small world. Well, that is an answer. That is an answer. It's more of a text message answer or possibly an email answer. There are two things that are problematic with this example. The first thing is that it has no detail to it. It has no development to it. It has no grounding texts or videos that this person is referencing to connect with what they're saying about diversity in their workspace. It also is not quite answering the question. The question is, how do you experience diversity in your current workspace? So the expectation is that this person is going to come back and they're going to respond with I. There are lots of people of various religions and races in my workspace. It needs to be a first person, that's I, a first person response. And so make sure that you are doing that. Make sure that you are actually answering the question and that you're not answering the question in second or third person in a you or a he or a she. But if it's asking, how do you experience, then you need to answer with I. And that should come with your personal experience that is all kind of wrapped up in a larger package of the greater conversation. So if you look at the verses below, I gave you another example. I'm surrounded by diversity in my workspace. I work as an acquisitions editor for Peter Lane Publishers, and on and on and on. I'm describing to you who I am. And not just that there's diversity in the workspace, but I'm telling you what my workspace is. Right? I'm giving some information, I'm developing, I'm expounding. And then I'm talking about what kinds of diverse experiences we have in that workspace, not just saying, oh, yes, we experience, religions and races. It's more than that. What else do we think about as diversity? Various religious perspectives, gender perspectives, racial and ethnic perspectives, as well as insights due to language diversity. We are multi-abled and we also are of various ages. You see me really giving a comprehensive explanation of my workspace, and I am actually thinking about all the different ways that we might express diversity that impact my workspace. So the first one is the text message that is not academic writing and is not going to result in maybe the grade that you might want. The lower paragraph, that is much more engaging. It's much more detailed. It's much more developed. It's more, just flat out interesting. It's personal. It answers a lot of questions that the reader might have in their mind as you're answering. So you really want to head for that second type. Okay. I always say when you're questioning yourself, overshare. This is the place where, normally we say, stop oversharing, right? We don't like it when people overshare. Well, in your academic writing, this is the space where you need to overshare and go right ahead. All right, so then let's go on to the next bullet, which is beginning to talk about identity construction. And if you have any further questions for me, with regard to your work and how much is too much, and do I understand you, Dr. Johnson? Is this what you're asking me for? Then feel free to email me, and we will work it through so that you are very happy with your submission and then the ultimate grade that comes from your submission. Okay, So yeah, so identity construction. So just a brief overview. I'm going to delve into this in one of our other modules, but just to get a sense of ecological systems theory. That's the wheel, the kind of concentric wheels that you're looking at there. Is an interesting theory that helps us to understand how identity is shaped. So if you consider the child in the very, very center, consider yourself sitting in the center. What we say about ecological systems theory is that there are multiple ecologies in any person's experience, because they have various contexts in which they are living and developing. And so that child has a particular construct or ecology or context that is the immediate family, right? That child and the immediate family probably has the most time, the earliest contact with the person, and it is from that immediate family that that child is starting to develop a sense of self. Who am I? Who am I first? Just from an autonomous point of view, and then who am I with respect to this close network of mine? And then you go out one, and you have kinship and informal networks, and that can be friends or members of the cultural group. It could be neighbors, and in that context, there are messages that are helping that child to understand, okay, who am I in my family, in my household? This is how I understand myself. Now, when I get out into just expand out into the larger community a little bit, that community is, I fit into that community in this way. And so this is how I understand my identity with respect to that network. And then I come out a little bit more, and then that's the local environment, the formal networks and services. And you can see those are schools, health services, sports club, childcare, things like that, your local government. And that person is now contemplating how they understand themselves with respect to that environment. And on it goes. And so what we talk about with regard to ecological systems theory is that important to the identity is that who the child understands himself or herself to be intrinsically needs to line up with who the family helps that child to understand that he or she is. And then that also needs to line up with who the kinship and informal networks help that child to understand who they are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In any one of those rings, in any one of those ecological systems, when the messaging is countering the identity of that child, we have what's called a dissonance. That is like a mind split, where the person has two contending thoughts about himself or herself, has two competing ideas of who they are. And that's when we start getting those masks. Okay, well, I know who I am in my complete and utter liberty. My family, they may accept this part of me or that part of me, and those parts that they don't quite accept, I have to kind of wear a little bit of a mask to hide myself, because that's in contention with who I feel like I am intrinsically. And then you get out into those kinship and informal networks. And if there's a problem there where there's a contention with my identity, now I'm combating that, and I have to figure out how I'm going to negotiate that. So that becomes the problem with identity construction, is that it's not simply who do we say we are intrinsically, but our various environments also speak into our identities and start to define us for us. And when those definitions all line up with who we say we are, then we're in pretty good shape. But when they start to contend with who we say we are, then we start to see problems and that idea of dissonance. So we'll talk about that much more a little bit further through the course. Also good to know is that there are, as we're talking about cultural competence, it's important to note that things like food, dress, heroes, when we want to feel like we're in the know with various cultural groups because we like Mexican food, or because for Halloween, we dress up and we want to represent something in particular or whatever, those things are very surface level things that are actually, they're not really getting to the meat of who people are. Those are very surface things. Really, when we say we want to be culturally competent, when we say that we want to really fully value and embrace and encourage people in their identities, we've got to go much deeper than that. We've got to go beyond those, the food, dress, heroes, beyond what are their kind of customary rules and kind of norms within their cultural expression, down even deeper to much more what I want to say, nuanced aspects of their knowledge bank. How do they understand who they are? How do they think about certain things? How do they react to things because of the knowledge bank that they have in describing who they are? How do they know what they know? What are all the pieces that are feeding that knowledge bank so that they understand who they are? To include their ethical position. What is it that shapes their ethic? Those are all those deep things that help us to be much more culturally competent as we engage with diverse peoples. And that word diverse can be anything. We can be talking about age, we can be talking about gender, we can be talking about sexuality, we can be talking about language. There's so much that comes with that idea of diversity. Okay, moving on. So from that, we have this notion of intersectionality. And so when we talk about intersectionality, what that means is exactly what I just said. In my identity, I experience the world through multiple identities, right? Intersectional identities. I am a female, and I experience my world as a female. I am also a female of color, and so I experience the world because of what I call my phenotype. That means what do you guys see when you look at me, right? You see a certain type of hair, you see a certain eye color, you see a certain skin color. Well, that all presents itself to the world, and the world reacts to me based on my phenotype. Ethnically, I am multi-ethnic. So I experience the world as a Black woman, also as an Indigenous woman, also as a Euro woman having ancestry from multiple European countries. I have more than one language that I speak, and on and on and on. I am a complex being, and that's really what we're acknowledging when we're talking about intersectional identities or multiple identities, and the idea that we experience the world through those multiple identities. Really what we're saying is we are unique individuals. No two of us are exactly the same. And so we're not going to experience the world exactly the same. And so if we want to talk about it from the standpoint of social justice versus injustices, I am going to experience the world differently than, say, my sister, who is also a female, also has the same multiple ethnicities. She has a different level of education than I have. She has a different phenotype than I have. And we live in different cities. We have a different number of children, and just kind of on and on I could keep on going. And so the way my sister experiences justice or injustice is just a little bit different than the way I experience justice or injustice, because of all of these multiplicities that all come together, and at the center point is where I am, versus at the center point is where my sister is, etc. Okay. And so that's what we mean when we talk about intersectional identities, is that identity, again, is a very large conversation that is never exhaustive. It is always dynamic as people describe themselves and understand themselves in a lot of different ways. Okay, that all kind of come together to be that unique being. So we need to be careful that as we're talking about identity, let's say we're talking about cultural identity, that we don't accidentally essentialize, which is another word for broad brush. We don't want to broad brush people's experiences because we think that we understand something. And that's one of the things with cultural competence that you need to know. And that is that within any cultural aspect, that human being that whom you are talking with is a unique human being. And though they may have many things in common with someone else within their same cultural framework, that person is a unique individual, and you need to be careful not to broad brush because you feel very competent in understanding their culture, because that person is unique and you need to get to know that person specifically before you come to any kind of assumptions. In fact, I would say don't assume. You need to get to know that person. Otherwise, you're broad brushing them, and that can lead to a terrible offense. So, for example, if I just wanted to take an example, you might ask me, Dr. Johnson, don't you think the Statue of Liberty is cool? What does that symbolize for you? Well, the way when I look at the Statue of Liberty and I consider my indigenous roots and my African American roots, and I may not have the same kind of reaction to that statue, to Lady Liberty, that somebody else who can go to Ellis Island and is very excited because they can go through the books and they can find one of their ancestors where they have signed the book and they have come in to the country through Ellis Island. The two of us, we're going to have really different perspectives and approaches to how we discuss the Statue of Liberty. And that's going to come through all of those different identities that we walk around with, so that, again, the discussion is going to be a unique discussion because no two of us are exactly alike. And so if we want to talk about someone who is also African American Indigenous, they may have a very different perspective than I do on the Statue of Liberty. So again, we cannot broad brush, but we have to accept that all of these identity markers that help to make us up to be who we are help us to interpret our world, right? And respond to our world. And we are all going to respond to our world differently, and therefore that need for cultural humility and cultural competence. Okay, so let's take a look at biases. I have attached this video for you in the announcement. I'll let you go ahead and look at it on your own, but I want you to take a look at this. And the question you want to ask yourself is, when I'm talking about biases, are biases a function of nature? Are they a function of nurture? Or are biases a function of both? Is there a rationale for having biases? And if so, how are biases actually supposed to operate? And then think about whether you feel like our current conversations about biases, cultural biases, and language biases, and all of these different biases that we talk about, are we working within a proper framework, or is it something else that that needs some correction? So just, I want you to think about that. Is it nature? Is it nurture? Is it both? Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? Where is it healthy? And where is it unhealthy? Where do we need to contemplate a little bit and improve to improve our world? So I will let you on your own time take a look at this video. It's really cool. Oops. Let's see. We can advance. Okay. So kind of moving from that idea of understanding our identities to cultural competence, one of the things that we need to think about is in shaping our identities and all of those concentric circles, right? All of those various ecologies. Not everybody has contact with the same ecosystems. You know, we don't all share experience in the same ecosystems. So what we need to think about is what are the various ecosystems that we have personally been exposed to as those ecosystems all come together and define and redefine and shape and reshape how we see the world, our worldview, right? Our ways of thinking, how we think through things, how we interpret our world, how we respond to our world, our ways of being, right? How we express ourselves in our world, our value systems. How do all of those ecosystems come together and shape those for us as an individual? So I want you to think about that. What are all of the things that are the influencers to help me in understanding how I think about the world and how I respond to the world and how I act in the world and what my value system is? And this is a really cool little exercise just to kind of get your wheels going. And this is an example that's specific to race, racial identity, and understanding exactly how culturally competent you are cross-racially. You can use this with anything, any aspect of culture. You can kind of what I want to say, revise the activity to meet the target that you're trying to look at. So in this particular case, for my students and another course that I teach, we're working with race. And so we call it diversity beads. And so you can see the little bubbles at the top. If you would identify yourself or another person as Latinx, you would color in black as the bead. If the person is Black or African American, you color in orange there. Blue is for someone who's white. Green is for someone who's Asian. And then you have an other. And I now just as, gosh, the more the generations kind of keep rolling by, I have students who ask me, what if the person is biracial? Do I color in my bead 2 different colors? Well, of course, I let them do that. I think that is really super. So what you would do is you would answer that first one, your race or your ethnicity. How do you define yourself racially or ethnically? And you go and you look at the beads and you find the color that you would relate to, or the race or the ethnicity that you would relate to in that corresponding color, you color the bead in. And then your significant other. What race represents your significant other? Go up, look at the color choices, color in your bead. What about your best friend? What about your doctor? What about your dentist? And this is not a perfect activity, folks. It's not exhaustive. It is not perfect. It really is just to let us have some fun with something that allows us to start a conversation, right? To examine something, in this case, race, and how competent are we outside of our own race. And you color in your beads. And then when you look at your diversity beads, it's a visual that allows you to see exactly how competent you are. Because sometimes we really think that we're a little bit more with it than it actually turns out that we are. So if we were talking about whatever aspect of culture, let's say we're talking about race, and we feel like we are very culturally competent, But my bracelet there, the one that is on the left, is mostly black beads with a spattering of blue and one orange. How much do I actually really know about the person on the right side who only has one blue bead and the majority of their beads are actually orange? Am I really culturally competent if my right hand beads look as they do, or excuse me, the beads on the left look as they do, and I'm trying to relate to the person on the right who has clearly very, very different bead colors? Um, how competent am I likely to be if the majority of my influencers, the majority of the people who are around me, are black beads and a couple of blue beads with one orange? And I'm trying to feel competent in saying that I understand the person who has almost all orange beads. You see, those ecosystems suddenly become really important, and specific about those ecosystems or the cultural experience that we have, that we're being shaped in, is going to give us the nuanced knowledge base, that deep, 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 deep identity understanding, to help us to relate well to somebody who is culturally different. So if our experiences, our exposures, are all a departure from the person we're trying to relate to, then we've got some work to do. And doing this little bead activity helps us to visually understand that. Is when we have beads that look like either the left or the right, what that tells us is that, well, if what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to be culturally competent with someone else whose their bracelet might be all black beaded, well, then I'm probably doing pretty well. Or if I am the person, the owner of the right-hand side, and I personally have had most of my influencers in the orange realm, and I am trying to feel culturally competent with other people who are in the orange realm, I'm probably doing pretty well. But if I'm trying to say that I am culturally competent with a completely opposing set of colors, how am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to actually understand someone enough to be competent when I have nothing that has influenced me to understand that person's way of being, way of knowing, or sets of values? So it tells you where you need to make a change, where you need to start to surround yourself with some other beads to help you in that competence. You don't know actually what you think you know. And so it lets you see where the work is that you need to do. Okay. A couple of things that I just kind of put here for you for your reference. Really interesting. I gave you a did you know? This is about the Statue of Liberty. I found myself learning something new several years ago. Most of my students, even up to my current students, when I show this to them, we find that they had no idea about this with regard to the creation of the Statue of Liberty, what she was originally actually meant to represent, and what all is part of the composition of the statue. So I'm providing this for you for your own reference, just something interesting for you to jump into. So that is there in the announcement for you. And then also, I was going to play by accident. Also, I have attached a conversation about race. As we are looking at biases, this is again just an FYI for your information, just to grow your knowledge bank. It's a nice jump off point to cause you to start to think about some other things. We don't want to just concentrate exclusively on race, but some of the conversations we have about race then make a nice transfer to have similar conversations about other aspects of cultural diversity. The question to ask ourselves about race is it a biological bias that we experience in our culture, or is it a socially constructed bias that we experience in our culture? And once we decide is race a biological thing, or is race something that we kind of came up with, some socially constructed framework that we came up with, so that it's not actually, it's real, but it's kind of not real? Then what do we do about all of that? And how does that help us to understand the biases that we have come to shape? And we all have them. What do we do with these biases? How do we now understand our biases, understanding maybe where they came from, and how do we look at that within the context of where are we going in our future as a society? Where do we want to go with this new knowledge? So I would like to encourage you to play. They are actually snippets from a much longer production that is actually several episodes, if I'm not mistaken. And what I did was I extracted the clips that would basically give you an overview of the whole conversation. And you get to experience the aha moment with a group of students who are being asked this question: what is race? And therefore, what are we to do about racial biases that we have once we understand what is race? And so you get to experience that with the students. So I'm going to end here, sign off here. And if you have any questions, again, you can email me. We can discuss them. We can pick up some conversation in your discussion board if you like, for the first week. And very good. So work well, produce well for me, give me something to really chew on. I want you guys to blow my mind, wow me with your writing. I want to get to know you through your writing, your thoughts and your perspectives and your experiences. So really shine, folks, really dig in, do the work. Yes, it's a lot. It's hard. It's hard on me as a professor, even having to grade all of that work so quickly. So we actually are in this together. I don't want you to think that I'm just lollygagging off, sipping mojitos while you guys are really nose to the grindstone. I'm there with you. I'm working hard with you, and there are moments when we're going to even need to hold each other up as the weeks go by and the work gets deep. So I'm here for you. I'm here for your success. I'm looking forward to getting to know you. Looking forward to engaging with you in your submissions. So take care, everyone.